The objective: to deliver the NBA to you like no other. News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gunn. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. Lauren S here, reacting live right after the Miami Heat have made it to the NBA Finals. We thought they were going to lose. We thought they were going to slip up. It didn't happen. 3-0, Boston. They're the only team. The Red Sox did it in 2004. What if Boston does it again? And none of that mattered. Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, and the Miami Heat are headed to the NBA Finals. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. It's the playoffs. Get in the game and make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Bet before the game or live and play on all your favorite teams' matchups. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. I am getting that out the way because we have a lot to discuss today, Lauren. I'll throw it to you just to see where you want to go with this, because I always do in moments like this. It's chaotic. It's crazy right now.
Yeah.
Nobody expected the Miami Heat to get to this point, right?
Right.
And nobody expected the Boston Celtics to come back from down 3-0. And then once that happened, nobody expected the Miami Heat to survive in Boston after losing in that fashion, the Derek White game winner, everything like that. How are you reacting to all of that? That it's just insane.
You know, as I was watching Game 7, I was watching it like I'm physically exhausted watching this game, even though it obviously ended and kind of went in the manner and it all ended the way it did. But as I'm watching this game, I'm like, where is Boston? Like, you're just waiting for the punch. Like, and we've been in that situation before, but it's Game 7. This is it. You know, I'm glad you mentioned the Game 6 ending in the Derek White crazy shot. Having that moment to bring you back home on your home floor with an opportunity to make history. Like, you have all the momentum, you have all the things in your corner, and to just go out in that manner. I want to talk about Jaylen Brown is what I want to talk about, because
we will get to that. We will get to that for sure. Absolutely. There's so many angles to approach this. I think just game wise, we can kind of start there. It was a blowout, ladies and gentlemen. 103-84. The Heat handled business. They looked, I think throughout, from the start of the game, it felt like the type of game the Heat want to play. It was slower. It was muddier. Things were grimy. You had to fight tooth and nail for every carved out possession. It just felt like that is the type of environment that the Miami Heat thrive in. And it turned out that way. Yes, the Celtics didn't shoot the ball as well as they wanted to. They struggled tonight. They couldn't hit any of their shots from outside. They shot 9 of 42. 9 of 42 from behind the arc, 21% from three. And yes, we can talk about the shooting. We can blame it on that. But I actually want to talk about the very first possession of the game. Jason Tatum rolls his ankle. That's the first thing that happens in the entire game. And right there in that moment, without it being that big of a deal, nobody really realized, like, oh, maybe it's just something he's dealing with. Well, now he's on the bench. He's, getting treatment for it. And, he's grimacing every time he takes a layup or grabs a rebound. Now that's an issue. And the game, the dynamic of the game, the momentum, if you will, the style of the game completely changed on its head. I think that was the turning point. I think that gave Miami, whether it was an actual edge or a mental edge, it gave them that, and they were in control throughout the rest of the game. That was Jimmy Butler being in control. He was awesome tonight. I mean, what did he have? He had 28 points. Yeah, he took 28 shots, but I mean, he did what he had to get there. And I think there's just so many aspects to this, but like the way the Heat were able to approach this game from a defensive standpoint, making the Celtics, they were taking some pretty good looks from behind the arc, but a lot of those looks were rushed. A lot of those looks were, hey, we're going to throw out a flyby, as the shot is going up, just to make sure we have a body there to contest it. And it worked. They did a good job executing their defensive game plan. The offensive side of things wavered for Miami, and we can get into that when we talk about Denver and how they match up, et cetera, et cetera. But for now, the Miami Heat, like they have done it. They have silenced all doubters. Jimmy Butler is headed to his second NBA Finals. Kyle Lowry is headed to his second NBA Finals. Bam Adebayo. It's a very, very cool moment for that franchise and for that group. We've talked about how much it matters to be here. Like they are the fact that they are now going to be mentioned in that upper echelon of teams in this last half decade of making it to the finals, getting to that point. And I'm sorry I'm going off here, but it's just so much. Lauren, please jump in whenever you can.
I mean, as I was watching them, kind of going back to one of the things that I said before about just being physically exhausted watching this game was, we've talked before about how Miami has this experience, but at the same time, Boston doesn't have the excuse of being this young team anymore that just needs time, needs reps. That's not an excuse. And the Jason Tatum injury was definitely a turning point. I agree with you there. But again, as I'm watching this game, it goes beyond Jason Tatum. You're watching the Miami Heat, Jimmy Butler, Haywood Highsmith making these, just everyone making hustle plays, even Kyle Lowry. So many guys, everybody on the team making hustle plays. And that is Heat culture. That's what they do. We've seen it all year, all playoffs. But when you are in kind of this quote unquote hostile environment and you're in a game 7 and the pressure is at an all-time high and it is quite literally do or die. To be able to stay in control and do the little things and stay detail oriented is very, very difficult to do. And I think when you see a team like Boston and you see a team like Miami go back and forth with a team that is kind of losing control and kind of losing their composure when you have Jason Tatum and you have Jaylen Brown and everyone is like, okay, well, Jason Tatum has this injury and that's kind of the Jaylen Brown opportunity for you to step up. And who are they deferring to? Derek White. That's no disrespect to Derek White, but like Jaylen Brown, that's your moment and you failed. And so I think for Miami to take advantage of the Jason Tatum situation and continue to do the little things, stay the course without feeling like you are ever playing with your food, that is what takes you to that next level. And I think that for this Boston team, I don't even want to call it growing pains. I don't even know really what you call that performance. But for Miami, I mean, it's just another, I don't know what necessarily lies ahead for them. That's a whole different conversation. But what they did tonight after losing and then having to go into an away arena, especially dealing with a Boston crowd, that is a lot to take on. And it just never looked like they were even phased by that. It was like they were on a mission, even from the time, I think Spo said right after game 6, he said, we wish we could tip this thing off right now. And you saw that in this game. So I think it was incredible. I'm very curious to see, moving forward, what happens in this next series for Miami, but all playoffs long, we have talked about what to expect from them. How high and how long can this thing go? And I mean, I'm done doubting them. I'm not necessarily saying I'm picking them over the Nuggets, but what they're doing, I can no longer pinpoint the trajectory. Not that I could before, but it's really amazing and a testament to what they've accomplished this season.
There's a level of resilience that is required to mental resilience, physical resilience, all that stuff that is required to lose your third best player in the first or second game of the NBA playoffs in Tyler Hero, and then lose the replacement to that player, which is Victor Oladipo, a couple of games after that, and then go on and fill your roster with guys, fill out the rotation with guys like Caleb Martin, who was waived by the Charlotte Hornets 2 seasons ago, picked up by the Miami Heat. Now the story has circulated everywhere, but yes, J. Cole set him up with a workout with Caron Butler in the Miami Heat. He signed on there with a 2-way contract, and now he averaged almost 19 points in the NBA in the Eastern Conference Finals and dropped 26. Was it 26 points tonight? Yes, he dropped 26 points on 11 of 16 shooting in a closeout Game 7 elimination game. I want you to understand how unbelievable that is for a guy who was averaging 9 points in the regular season, who was waived from one of the worst teams in the NBA 2 seasons ago, to now be the guy in so many aspects, the motor of what this Miami Heat team was in this series. Yes, Jimmy Butler is the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. He was sensational. Without him, he is the heartbeat of what this Miami Heat team is. But you need to have contributions from other guys. I just mentioned Hero went down earlier in the playoffs. Oladipo went down early in the playoffs. The fact that these guys have a resilience level, a belief in themselves mentally to be able to step up in these moments. Duncan Robinson last night or 2 nights ago in game 6, missing those shots, still playing well tonight, and also being very, very effective in the last game. Also just popping back up in the NBA playoffs. Remember how people were talking about Duncan Robinson, the albatross of a contract? How are they
Right.
going to move Duncan Robinson?
Mhm.
And now he is a key rotation piece back in there, for an NBA Finals team.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, guys who are going to be free agents looking for a lot of money this summer. Those guys also stepped up in major ways. Haywood Highsmith in the second quarter of this game. Haywood freaking Highsmith. Some people would say that is a 2K generated name, but it is not. He is a real NBA player, and the man played some great minutes tonight for the Miami Heat. To me, that is the secret sauce to Heat culture. That's why I have the red. I had to do the red to make it Heat culture. I was ready for it. It's the secret sauce. It's the fact that they are able to somehow, some way, get guys to buy into a system, a belief system, something that is mythical in a lot of ways. And it just helps them contribute whatever they ask, whatever they require of them. They are able to do it. That's the Miami Heat way.
It is.
And it worked.
It's unbelievable. And I tweeted something out earlier during the game, because as I'm watching these guys and continuing to watch what they've been doing, and they've been doing it all playoffs. It wasn't just tonight, but everyone is continuing to talk about the undrafted guys. And for years, we have talked about Miami as an organization and their ability to go out and find those guys. But I really do think it goes beyond that. And that was kind of the essence of my tweet, was that one of the things that the broadcast crew had said earlier in this, I believe it was this series, was that Miami, when they bring guys in, undrafted guys, they treat them as if they're quote unquote star players or players that were drafted.
I heard that in game 6. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not just undrafted guys that are like barely making the cut. And I think that there's something to that. I think that, a lot of guys in different systems might come in and have this mental pressure and stress and anxiety of, this is it. It's do or die with my career, with what I've been working my whole life for. And so I think the Miami Heat, not only do they have this knack for identifying talent, but it's identifying talent, identifying a fit within your system, the right mindset, the right personalities, and being able to bring them in and then kind of cater to them and welcome them into your system and into your organization to the point where they're ready to contribute on day one. That's very, very difficult to do. And I think that there's a lot that goes into that kind of gets, I don't want to say like overlooked, but people just gloss over it and say Miami can just identify. They're great at finding undrafted guys. I think it goes beyond that.
It's hard to quantify, right?
It's very hard. It's very hard.
If you're not day to day with the team, if you're not seeing exactly what they put these guys through, how are you able to, specify, okay, this is what is very different? Personally, one thing I would love to do in my time later down the road is to be able to go and investigate, like, okay, what makes this team's development system different from, I don't know, the Dallas Mavericks or the Toronto Raptors or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting point, and you bring it up, the way that they find guys that are willing to be developed and also just fit their system, what they want to believe in, what they're doing. Okay, maybe too much Heat culture right now. Let's flip it over to the Boston Celtics, because we can talk Miami Heat when we do. We'll talk about the Nuggets and the finals in a second, and we'll do a little bit more Miami Heat stuff now. The Boston Celtics have, for another season, fallen short of their expectations. I know that might be crazy to say, but this is a team that was the second best record in the NBA. behind the Milwaukee Bucks, which, by the way, the Miami Heat also eliminated. And they were expected to either win the NBA championship or make it to the NBA finals. And actually, no, I'll take that second caveat out of there. They were expected to win the NBA championship. That's what they came into this season saying. And they didn't. And they fell short of those expectations by a good amount. That's not to say that coming back from down 3-0 and making it a series, forcing Game 7 is not something worth not celebrating, but it is a failure. We go back to the Giannis and the quotes that happened earlier this season. The Boston Celtics season is a failure.
Yeah.
And yeah, they have questions they have to answer. They have things they have to address. One of those things is seemingly a recurring issue. And that's the fact that Jaylen Brown seems to not be the same type of player in these types of moments. We saw last year against the Golden State Warriors. They Draymond Green had that quote of we started forcing this guy left and things started to change from there. But I know a lot of people have exacerbated that and kind of made a joke of that whole thing. But at the end of the day, it's true. His ball handling has been insufficient, and it's stopped him from being a top tier star in this league. He had 8 turnovers tonight, and we saw that again tonight. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want to rain on the Jaylen Brown parade. That's not my intentions with this at all, because I think he is a good player. But it goes to the whole idea of why a Tatum Brown team can't work, because it's missing someone that can set the table for them. Marcus Smart is great. He's very underrated as a playmaker, in my opinion. Derek White is not much of a playmaker. He was awesome. He obviously impacts the game in other ways defensively, as an offensive rebounder, as a guy who can do all that plug and play connective stuff. That's what Derek White does. He's not a playmaker. Malcolm Brogdon, he was hurt. We could see that. But also he's not a playmaker. He's more of a scoring guard. He's a guy that can get you buckets off of the bench now. He's a 6th man of the year. That's what he's known for. They need another guy to set the table, because it's clear that Brown and Tatum have that as a deficiency. Yeah. They can't create their own looks and create for others at a high rate.
Right.
I think that's also, you mentioned this last week, but some people have brought that idea up about Kawhi and PG. They need a point guard next to them. I mean, the Clippers have been looking desperately for a point guard. That's why Russell Westbrook worked. Russell Westbrook was great in the playoffs and this season for the Clippers, because the Clippers desperately needed that type of player. I'm not saying the Celtics should go out there and get Russell Westbrook, although maybe that's a good fit. Honestly, I kind of don't hate that fit for them. I think that would make sense. But they need another guy that can set the table, that can create looks for them, that can get downhill and make life easier. That's probably the best way to put it. Make life easier for Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Because right now, the way that the team is structured, it just doesn't seem like it's prepared for, getting over that one hurdle at the end of it,
Yeah, and I hate, because I feel like there's an element of recency bias that's gonna come with this next phrase, but I do feel like this was kind of it. Like if this was the season that you couldn't get the job done, because I agree with what you said a second ago. It wasn't Eastern Conference Finals. It was the NBA Finals. That's the expectation. And championship. Yeah. And so for this Celtics team to have the 6th man of the year, to be stacked, like so deep, and to have kind of still seemingly glaring, easily identifiable issues that became clear that, okay, that this might prevent them from getting over the hump. Miami, not to discredit what they did and what they accomplished, but there are glaring holes. And so for this team moving forward, the Jaylen Brown question, I think is very interesting, because we can talk about off-season moves and all these things and the contract and whatever, but it wasn't just this game. The turnovers, it was bad this game, but everything was pretty bad for Boston this game. I'm like all series, and even it just hasn't been that great. And so there was a point where we talked about him and Jason Tatum as 1A and 1B. And I mean, I think there's an argument that he was not even 2 maybe tonight and maybe in previous games. You cannot have that to be as dominant of a team as Boston has been all season. And then to have your number 2 guy who's up for 5 years, $295 million this summer.
Supermax money.
That's insane. And so Boston has big decisions ahead of them. I hate that sometimes in this league, sometimes it's a matter of, we have to pay somebody because we're not just going to let them walk for nothing. We're not just going to, you kind of get stuck. So I'm not saying, they shouldn't give him the because that's just not how it works. Mm-hmm. But I do think that they have serious questions ahead of them, and who out there in terms of playmaking could they add at a low cost, or will it be more of a significant shakeup? And when you're looking at the playmaking, I don't know that a significant shakeup in that role specifically is out there. But
it's hard to find.
It's very hard to find, especially on the Tatum timeline. It's a lot to make work.
I agree with you, and it's asking. It's an impossible ask because those type of players are first rare. There's not that many of them anymore. There's not those type of table setters. Like ideally, what you would want with this team is like prime Chris Paul. Chris Paul would make this right. I know that's crazy.
I kind of knew you were going there too.
Well, it's like yeah, okay. Prime Chris Paul is an MVP candidate. Probably should have won that one year. And mm-hmm. I understand that that's a hard ask. That's a tough ask to make. There's not that many guys who can replicate that. And even at a lower level, like I mentioned with Russell Westbrook earlier, there's not a lot of guys that can do those things for you out on the open market. So what they can do to really shake it up, mm-hmm. people are going to jump at, okay, let's shake it up and break up Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and let's move and find someone else. I personally still think that would be a mistake. I know that we just talked about Jaylen Brown's deficiencies. I understand the money issues and everything like that. But unless you are getting a certifiable replacement that makes more sense than Jaylen Brown, mm-hmm. like let's say for some reason, randomly, the Portland Trailblazers are like, you know what, man, we're thinking of moving off of Damian Lillard. We will give you Damian Lillard. You give us Jaylen Brown. We'll call it. I don't know what the exact arrangements around that would be. But I don't think the Blazers would do that. And I don't think the Celtics would really consider it that much either. There's not that many things out there for the Celtics to do. And maybe mm-hmm. that's, to your point, what we're trying to say here. It's like, how many times are you going to kick this same can down the road? Maybe they're forced now to kick that same can down the road. Obviously, they have some questions in terms of, age and whatnot. Marcus Smart's getting a little bit older. Al Horford, obviously, is one of the elder statesmen of the NBA. So it's tough to envision how this team shakes out throughout the rest of, this next couple of years as they're growing into their prime. But I'll say this thing. The Celtics have 2 or 3 major issues they have to address, and I think they're not that crazy of issues. One, it's the over-reliance on the three-point shot. I think that it's very clear throughout this playoff series, we've seen that the offensive structure of this Celtics team is to get downhill and collapse the defense, generate open looks from behind the arc that way. And it works when you're hitting your shots, but there's no diversity of thought there when it comes to their offensive creation. So they lack in the department of, if our threes aren't falling, we can get to the rim, we can finish. Yeah. Our threes aren't falling. Okay, well, now we have a great off-ball game, cutting actions. You do the split actions like the Nuggets love to run, DHOs, things like that. They just don't have tons of that they can get into. And I think that's maybe an area where Joe Mazzulla and his coaching staff can grow. Maybe that's something to address in the offseason, getting more veteran experience on that coaching staff. And then the second side of this is how are we going to get another playmaker in there? And what would we have to do to change up our team in order to do that? We'll see. It's going to be a long offseason, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics as this kind of transpires. I know there was some discussion that Joe Mazzulla should get canned. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I think maybe when it was 3-0 and they were on the verge of a sweep, it was more of a conversation. But I think he's, at the very least, saved his career by forcing a Game 7. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. I think there was so much shock and wow factor with what was happening in those first 3 games that kind of begged the question. But then there's a lot that goes into being able to tie it up at 3-3. So I think
Yeah.
he has. I agree. I think he's secured his job moving forward, and I think that that's the right decision for the Boston Celtics because they're, like we've just talked about, there are going to need to be changes. You can't just run the same exact scenario back, but too much change can often kind of present cracks in the foundation sometimes. And so I think rocking with Joe moving forward will be kind of their best path forward, and kind of figuring out those around the fringes moves. That's what I think will be the next move for them. I kind of look at like Robert Williams, for example. I think that something there could help them out. But hanging on to Joe, hanging on to Jaylen Brown, I think you have to do that. Otherwise, you have real big questions if you are making those kinds of moves.
The other side of this is, like we mentioned, the money side. It's like, hey, both of these guys, we mentioned it in a podcast a couple of weeks ago, but they're going to combine for $600 million over this next 5 or 6 years if they were to both sign their Supermax extensions. Obviously, with Brown and making the All-NBA team, that's now in play. And I wonder if the Celtics look at it from that point of view. And I honestly, I'm not sure where the debate goes on that. I tend to say that Jaylen Brown is not a Supermax player. I know there's going to be some people, some Celtics fans, people who are going to be on the opposite side of that. But I mean, from what we've seen, from what we've been able to digest, he's definitely like, I really hate the Supermax designation because it really, it limits your flexibility as a team to be able to do things. And from the team side of points, it's a lot harder how to maneuver the cap minutia and figure out ways that you can create a competitive advantage for yourself when you have two Supermax players. It's a tough pill to swallow, and the Celtics will have to at the very least, question whether it's the right investment to make. Because once you sign him onto that Supermax contract, it might be a little bit more difficult to trade him, right? You're looking at Bradley Beal right now with the Washington Wizards. Bradley Beal is a great player, right? Good player. I think he could help a playoff team. I think there are some teams, maybe even fringe contenders, that could use a Bradley Beal. But at the same time, the money, the Supermax contract, we talked about it last week with how much he's owed and how far down the road he's owed that money. It becomes a question. And I think it becomes a fair question, especially with Brown.
So and I mean, even just the $600 million between Tatum and Brown, huge. We haven't even touched on the Grant Williams contract. You know what I mean? So I think that there's a big question there, and I don't want to assume that he's gone. That also feels very recency biasy, but that's a big question. There are going to be teams that throw him some money, even just for the sake of pulling him away from the Celtics. So that's another big question. And I mean, the financial implications of all of this, we've talked about the new CBA and the trades and where you're limited with moving draft assets. So I think the Celtics, when it comes to, if you don't necessarily have faith that good God,
what up, Winston?
Oh God, yes, he gives his best. But if they don't have faith that because that's a whole other layer to this. If they don't have faith that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are the duo of the future. Okay, say you throw Jaylen Brown the money just to keep it moving forward so he doesn't walk. Then how do you necessarily build your team moving forward? You know what I mean?
Your flexibility is ruined.
Yeah, even if you're like, oh, we'll just trade Jaylen Brown and this and this and this. Well, it might not be that simple if the opportunity presents itself. And that's another thing that I think is going to have to go into the decision making for the Boston Celtics.
You know, it's crazy. I hear the little God. Thing and it's crazy because I keep thinking it's my dog. My dog keeps walking in the room and I'm like, what is attached to your leg? What is going on? Okay.
He's so bad. So bad.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, a bunch of dogs, man. A bunch of dogs like the Miami Heat. I think with the Boston Celtics, like we will see what happens as the summer goes down, because who knows, right? Jaylen Brown could be frustrated with his situation and want out. Maybe he says that him and Jason Tatum are the best of buds and they never want to break up. And
either of those. I could see either of those.
Yeah, it's wide open to debate. Obviously, Brown has been very loud and open about his, he obviously doesn't like Celtics fans, or at least he said it in passing that, like, yes, there is a sort of disdain when it comes to how Boston and, I think that's there, right? He's mentioned it multiple times. I also think him potentially getting traded and being thrown in trade rumors multiple times thing hasn't worked out really well between him and the Celtics organization. And now when you have this stuff mounting on top of that, I think it gets to the point where maybe he also considers it from his perspective that it might be time to amicably split ways, if you will.
Right.
I don't know why I slurred my words there, but yes. Okay, look, so we'll see what happens with the Boston Celtics. Let's get back to the Miami Heat, who are going to the NBA Finals, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. June 1st, Thursday, Game 1 in Denver. The Denver Nuggets have been waiting for 9 days, actually.
That's crazy.
Jokic has been able to go back home, jump on his horses, chill out a little bit. But he really could have. He really could have went home and came back and, no big deal. I just watched Succession. Those guys use private jets like nothing. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess the point here is that we have an NBA Finals matchup on our hands. It's the Nuggets, who are the number 1 seed, who look like world beaters throughout the Western Conference. They absolutely demolished the Timberwolves, then they demolished the Phoenix Suns, and then they went on and demolished the Los Angeles Lakers. They have been world beaters. They've only lost, 3 games? 4 games? 4 games. Yeah, they've only lost 4 games in these NBA playoffs.
It's crazy.
Actually, no, they lost to the Timberwolves they beat the Timberwolves in 5 or 6. I'm losing my head now.
Now I'm getting confused.
Whatever, 3 or 4 games. They've only lost 3 or 4 games in these NBA playoffs, and that is incredibly impressive. Mm-hmm. We are losing our heads here at Monday at late night Monday, but it's an NBA Finals matchup. Where do you want to start with this? How do you think it shakes out, first of all, and where does the advantage lie? It's obviously going to be Miami, and I see Winston kind of going crazy. I don't know if you want me to jump in first, but yes.
How do you feel? I'll go. I think the advantage lies with Denver. I think most people feel pretty confident in Denver's ability, but I'm very curious to see what Miami throws at Jokic. Obviously, Denver running their offense through Jokic. I'm curious to see what Miami will try to counter that with, and then what the adjustment from Mike Malone will be. How much are they going to be able to rely on Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr.? Are they going to be consistent enough to counter what Miami throws at Jokic and tries to mitigate his playmaking and make the other guys make the decisions? The Bruce Brown, again, the Jamal Murrays, even Aaron Gordon to an extent. I'm not necessarily Aaron Gordon to a lesser degree, but they need to make other guys make decisions, and I want to see how effective and how consistent those guys can be.
Well, that starts with Miami's defense, right?
Exactly.
I think, look, it's hard because a lot of people have brought up the fact that Bam Adebayo is 8-0 versus Nikola Jokic in his career. The Denver Nuggets, they have the number 1 offense against zone coverage in the NBA in regular season and in the playoffs. They dominate against the exact style that the Miami Heat plays because the Miami Heat are incredibly over-aggressive as a defense. They are sending help constantly. They're trying to force turnovers. They're trying to get out and running. They're trying to push in transition. And because of that, they're forced to play this over-aggressive style on defense. That is the type of defense that Nikola Jokic can carve up, just absolutely demolish, because he can see the help coming. He creates shots for his teammates. Now his teammates are all hitting their shots. There's momentum building. There's energy. Jokic is getting involved. The entire Nuggets team is getting involved. And before you know it, they're up 20 points. That's how that's how the Nuggets play basketball.
Yeah.
And I just think that how Eric Spoelstra attacks that problem, approaches that, will be the key to all of this. Obviously, with Nikola Jokic, teams have tried different things. They've tried their big man one-on-one. They've tried to place a smaller player on Jokic and keep their big man as the help, as the Lakers did with Rui Hachimura and Anthony Davis. Maybe the Heat try something like that. Maybe they go, okay, hey, we're going to put, I don't know, Haywood Highsmith or Kevin Love. We'll put Kevin Love on Nikola Jokic. He's a big body, 6'10", 6'11". Maybe his size can deter him. His length can maybe bother him, and have Bam Adebayo as the weak side guy. The issue is Bam Adebayo isn't the biggest guy either. He's 6'9". Yes, he can be a big presence, but he's not a shot blocking, rim deterring type of, he's not the dominant paint presence. He's more known as the defensive versatility guy on defense, the guy you can using multiple positions in multiple areas of the court on defense. So
Right.
I wonder how the Heat are able to approach that. That being said, it's hard to use any of the data we've seen from the regular season and from their matchups before this to talk about this current Miami Heat team, because they're a different team. They're hitting their shots. Their role players have stepped in. They're missing Tyler Hero, who most likely won't be back in the NBA Finals from what the reports have said. And they have these other guys who the Nuggets haven't necessarily had to face much yet. Caleb Martin, Duncan Robinson is back in the mix. You obviously have the other role players that can play a factor as well in Max Strus, Gabe Vincent. They have the Miami Heat, I think, have the, if this matters to you at all, it's the veteran experience of being in the NBA Finals. Sometimes those lights can get bright, like sometimes it can mess with the player. And I'm not saying that'll happen to the Denver Nuggets. I think they're a very composed team. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the Heat have just been there more. Kevin Love, so I just saw a funny stat. Kevin Love has made it to the NBA Finals every single time he's been in the playoffs. How crazy is that?
Wow.
Yeah, because it was the Cavs, and now, the one time he came with the Miami Heat, they're headed to the NBA Finals. Kyle Lowry has been an NBA finalist. Obviously, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Duncan Robinson, those guys that were part of the 2020 run also have experience. I wonder if that plays a factor. I don't buy into that much, but it could be something.
It could. Yeah. I think it could, especially when there are, not that Denver relies so heavily on Christian Brown or even Bruce Brown they do rely on Michael Porter Jr., but in the moments where guys don't necessarily have an abundance of experience at the highest level where the lights are brightest, I will be interested to see if there are moments where it's like, okay, there might be a little bit of something there, because sometimes it's these key possessions can be a game-changing, momentum-changing sequence in a game that then ends up being a huge momentum swing in the entire series. So I am curious to see if that's something that we feel maybe retrospectively was a factor. I saw as of 20 minutes ago, Chris Haynes said that Miami Heat guard Tyler Hero is ramping up workouts and is expected to make his return at some point, with Game 3 being the likely target. We will see. We will see, because there's the fitness question. There's the rotate, there's big questions, but I'll be very curious to see what that looks like.
They've looked better without him. I know. And that's not to say that they are a better team without a guy like him, but continuity wise, you're throwing him, like you mentioned, that you're gonna just throw him into the NBA Finals.
That's I don't know that I love that. I don't know that I would do that. You know what I mean? That's a huge risk, because you're going to be right in the middle of a series, making adjustments, going back home, and then you're going to just completely switch everything up. There's a lot of risk
up there. Your playoff rotation. You already have guys set. They obviously know their roles. To throw a guy like Hero in there, who is a high usage player, that's a hard question. I think that's something you have to really, really try to recognize. From Spo's perspective, how he approaches that. That's going to be super, super key and very interesting. Good point on that. Very interesting if Tyler Hero comes back in the series, because that'll help the Miami Heat a little bit offensively. Right. Obviously, this is another level offensive talent-wise. Okay, the Celtics are a great offensive team. The Celtics are a great offensive team. The best offensive team that Miami has faced in these playoffs. The Bucks weren't a great offensive team. They were great in transition, but with Giannis Antetokounmpo hurt, it was a different story. The Knicks were one of the best offenses in the league in the regular season, but Miami had a great plan for them because they were such an ISO-heavy team. You can look up the ISO stats from the regular season and the playoffs. The Knicks' offense was Jalen Brunson ISO, Julius Randle ISO. And in the playoffs, that's easier to stop, ladies and gentlemen. That's just the truth of the matter. It's not as potent of an offense. The Celtics, on the other hand, were a step up even from the Knicks, who were a top 5 offense. I think it was top 3, actually, offense in the league. The Celtics were number 2. They've been an incredible shooting team all season. They were high octane. If there was a Celtics Nuggets series, man, would that be an incredible offensive series, because it would just be back and forth. They'd be flying back and forth. It'd be up tempo. The shooting would be incredible, all of that. But this right here, Heat Nuggets, is a very big clash in style. The Heat, they want to get muddy. They don't want you to score a lot of points. They're going to try everything possible, including throwing a zone out at you, switching man to man, really trying to like switch things up just to make you uncomfortable. That's what the Miami Heat are going to try to do in a playoff series. How effective that is against the Denver Nuggets and their incredible offense, which is better than the Celtics and the Knicks and the Bucks, we'll see.
It's the ultimate test.
It's
the ultimate test because it's like, it's not only is it the talent level with the Denver Nuggets, but like the level of cohesion that they play with, it's so crisp. And so I'm very, very curious to see just the adjustments from a defensive perspective alone, how Spo goes about that and what that looks like over the course of a series, because obviously it's gonna change. But I do think it's gonna be very interesting because it is such a clash of the styles. I like the way you said that. And I think it's going to be a good one. I don't want to say that it's going to be so dominant on Denver's side that it's going to be a quick, in and out. I don't want to say that. I don't. Let's hear it. Oh, I need this. Let's hear the hot take.
Yeah, no, look, I think there is a world where the Heat can win this series. A lot of people are just writing them off and saying that the Nuggets are going to steamroll them. And I think there are genuine reasons to believe that. We just outlined a bunch of them. Why you would think the Nuggets have the upper hand 99 times out of 100, maybe even when it comes to the series. But we just saw the Heat beat the Celtics, and they apparently, according to ESPN analytics, had a 3% chance to do that.
Nuts.
So I'm just saying, I think
they're the one team you can't steamroll. You can't just write them off.
Exactly.
It's one team.
At the very least, I am saying, I can't say Nuggets in 4 or 5. I know that for sure because I just know the Miami Heat are going to somehow find a way to win a couple games.
Yeah.
Out of respect to Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat and Heat culture because of this light bulb, I'm going to say the Nuggets in 6. That is my current prediction. If the Heat win this series, more power to them. Incredible story. What a unbelievable run to be the first 8 seed to win an NBA championship, second 8 seed to make it to the NBA finals, beating all 3 top 3 teams in the NBA.
That would be insane.
It would be absolutely insane. I would not be shocked because they have been shocking the world literally every single series.
Yep.
I have not picked them in one series.
Me either. Because every time we do a preview, every time we talk about them, I'm like, I just don't see how they can do it. But I'm not going to be surprised if they do it. And then they do it. And I'm like,
and then they do it.
You think I'd learn.
With the Bucks, we're like, they obviously have playoff history. They've done this before, but realistically, they probably won't do it. They do it. Yep. The Knicks were like, man, it was a great run, but the shooting variance with the Bucks series, they were shooting the lights out. Can they keep that up? They didn't, but they still won the series. And then in the Celtics series, we're like, look, man, it's been a great run. It's been a great run. You tried.
Great story, good time.
Yeah, great story, good times. Pat on the back. See you next season. They go up 3-0. And we're like, oh wow. Well, I guess an 8 seed is just gonna sweep.
This feels familiar.
Yeah. And who knows if they somehow find a way to do that again in the NBA Finals. They've proved us wrong 3 times in a row. And what is it? What's the saying go? The George Bush saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. Yeah, I don't remember.
Shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Anyways, that is the finals preview. We will talk about it more in depth Thursday through on. There is some other news in the NBA world. And I can't believe that this is towards the end of the podcast because there's just so much that happened with that game, ladies and gentlemen. We're 45 minutes in. We've been talking Eastern Conference basketball, so we might as well continue talking about Eastern Conference basketball, but this is offseason related. The Philadelphia 76ers have their new head coach, a head coach I am familiar with. This is Nick Nurse of the Toronto Raptors. NBA champion Nick Nurse is going to be the head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers. He's their guy. He met with Joel Embiid. He met with Daryl Morey in the office of the Sixers, basketball operations group, and he signed on. Apparently, according to Wojnarowski, the Woj bomb drop, and I read the article. Hey, he picked Phoenix. He picked Philadelphia over Phoenix.
Interesting.
So
That's really
maybe
interesting.
that's a little bit of PR moves from Nurse. But it seems like he's going to Philly, and it seems like they're trying to build something there. That he sold them on the vision on how to work around Embiid and how to build around Embiid. Obviously, Philly has much to address in the offseason when it comes to the James Harden news. That's going to be a big factor here, is how are they going to retain Harden? Are they going to retain Harden? And how does this team look next year with Nurse at the helm, offensively, defensively, etc.? But it's funny that it's Philly. To me, it is funny that it's
Yeah.
Philly. So
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the coaching carousel, and I feel like for weeks we both have been, or correct me if I'm wrong, have just felt like Nick Nurse in Philadelphia just wasn't necessarily the best fit. It didn't feel right, and so
well, it just felt like it would be awkward,
yeah, there's that too. Yeah,
Yeah,
with the history with Embiid, and so
yeah,
I don't really know. I don't know what to make of it. I need to see the system in play, and I need to
mhm,
see what the roster looks like, because I saw a couple of Rockets people that I follow reacting to the news and saying this doesn't
right,
feel like a very James Harden friendly. Like on paper it's like, okay, competitive coach, competitive culture, they're trying to do this, but I saw a lot of Rockets people saying this does not feel like a James Harden kind of
higher,
situation. Yeah, and I
yeah,
thought
yeah,
that was interesting. I don't know what to make of it. Well, it's 100% a wait and see kind of thing. As
mhm,
of right now, I do feel like Philly has no choice but to bring him back. Obviously, there's a lot of control in James' hands, but if you're Philadelphia, you need to do everything you can. And I'm kind of scratching. I don't want to say scratching my head on the hire, because you do have to get somebody who you can compete with. But I just the fit is still it's a little bizarre to me. So I'm curious to see how it shakes out. But I don't know. I didn't love it. I didn't love it.
yeah. I think there are legitimate questions about how the fit looks, because there's a couple of things we've seen from Nick Nurse. Raptors fans who are listening to this will know the criticisms around Nick Nurse were the following: that he would run guys too hard, there would be too much minutes played was a big issue when it came to running the starters into the ground. And some people will mention development and how the young guys on the team, including a Malachi Flynn, a Delano Banton, Christian Coloco, even other guys, Ron Harper Jr., whoever, um, didn't really get a lot of opportunity to play and to develop and to figure things out. And I think those are two criticisms that were, I would say, they're fair. Although the minute side of things, who knows? Maybe the front office was, really pushing to make it to the NBA playoffs. Maybe Nurse himself was feeling the pressure of having to make it to the playoffs, and maybe that was a goal that they had for this season. And I think maybe that type of thing could be possible. At the end of the day, Nick Nurse is an NBA champion. I hope that Raptors fans can appreciate the fact that he is their, NBA champion. I know there is a little bit of divisiveness when it comes to Nurse. I think the fan base is ultimately very, very split when it comes to discussing him
Interesting.
because of how things ended.
Yeah.
I think it left a sour taste in people's mouth, the way he was like, "Oh, I have to reassess things," and then he gets let go. And I think the way that it kind of spiraled over these last couple of seasons has changed the overall perspective. But let's not get it twisted. He's the highest winning percentage coach in Raptors franchise history, won an NBA championship. He was instrumental in that championship as well. A lot of people remember the box and one against Steph Curry, him being very creative. A lot of
Hmm.
other coaches, including your own Rick Carlisle, has mentioned that they've borrowed from Nick Nurse.
Yeah.
And I think that goes to say he is a good coach. He is a good
Yeah.
coach,
Yeah.
but he is ultimately a flawed coach, like many out there.
Right.
But maybe it's just that the flaws that he has are something the Sixers can deal with. The flaws
Yeah.
that Doc Rivers had was that he lacked in the playoff adjustment department, and the Sixers couldn't deal with that.
Yeah.
Nurse doesn't have that
That
issue. He
issue.
is
Yeah.
he is great at adjusting in the playoffs. So
Yeah, I think, and I agree. I'm glad you mentioned his resume, because when I think about this situation in my mind not necessarily being a great fit, it's weird, and I don't find myself saying this very often, but it's not as much because the coach was the quote unquote wrong hire because he's not qualified, but it's because of what he has a history of working with and how completely different it is with the personnel that he's now going to be working with.
That's a good point.
Like running James Harden and Joel Embiid into the ground. I don't know if that's what he's going to do, but even from like a defensive standpoint, the types of players that he's used to working with versus what he's going to have now. I mean, God, you got to bring B-Ball Paul back because, oh my God, like it's just going to be night and day to me. And that I think is the biggest, how is that going to work? I need to see it before I'm like, okay, makes sense.
They say that the best coaches adapt to their players. They don't adapt. They don't force their players into one 100%. Type of system. We'll see how good of a coach Nick Nurse is, because realistically, the Raptors had asked him, and maybe he, under his own kind of vision, wanted to feel this out as well. But they employed perimeter defenders, guys who can, guard quote unquote 1 through 5. They can be aggressive. They can overhelp. And I'm not sure if that is as sustainable with the Sixers. Right. You can play a different style. You can be more successful defensively with Philly because of the paint presence that is Joel Embiid. I mean, Embiid at his best defensively can win a Defensive Player of the Year award. He is that good on the defensive end. And maybe Nurse is good enough defensively as a schemer, if you will, to be able to get them there. The personnel, you're right, is going to be a big issue. I mean, you have PJ Tucker, who's 36 years old. Do they bring back a Tobias Harris? Do they look in trading Tobias Harris? Tyrese Maxey and James Harden are absolutely food on the perimeter when it comes to defensive stuff. Yes, they have Jalen McDaniels. Jaden, yes, you're right. They have Jaden McDaniels. Sorry, guys, it's 12 o'clock at night.
It's Jalen. Oh, God.
See, we're losing ourselves here.
We are.
J-Mac and J-Mac.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, no, but yes, look, they don't have that much perimeter defense talent. That's my whole point with this. And that'll be a question. How are they going to adjust? But regardless, he is in Philly. He is locked in long-term, and he is now a part of the process, whatever the process is. If the process is dead to you, alive, still beating, I'm not sure, but he is there, and he is now a part of whatever this momentum is to try to get Joel Embiid an NBA championship in Philadelphia. That is the whole story. It's interesting because of the rivalry the Raptors and Sixers have created for themselves over the last half decade. The Kawhi shot, they've met in the playoffs a couple of times. There's obviously been animosity between Embiid and Nurse, and now Embiid and Nurse are on the same team. It'll be very, very interesting. Pascal Siakam and Joel Embiid are from the same motherland. Like, it's very, very interesting to see how this thing will all transpire. And yeah, I'm curious. It's going to be a very fun offseason. I feel like we say that every single time we end one of these podcasts.
There's never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment in the NBA. And we still have an NBA Finals matchup to play, ladies and gentlemen. We still have an NBA championship to give out. Lauren, anything else before we head out here? 12 o'clock on a Monday, tapping out.
Oof, a doozy. No, I think we hit on it all.
Okay, cool. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tapping into the Objective Basketball Podcast. As always, from Lauren, from myself, we will see you later. Peace.
Follow hosts at Just S Baraheni on all socials and at the Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.